Hello, I am Miss Andrika, and I am super excited to have you all on tonight for our fab50 tune-up. And tonight, our topic is Unlock the Secrets of Women's Health in Athletics with our specialist, Kahlee York. I cannot wait for you to hear all about Kaylee's background. And for all of our fab50 ambassadors, you will be super excited that she is a fellow alum of LSU Tigers. So go Tigers down in Baton Rouge. So super excited to welcome Kahlee York to our tune-up tonight.
Hey guys, excited to be
Hi,
here.
Kahlee. Thank you so much for joining us and saying yes. We are always super thankful for all of our specialists and all the experts in the field that always partner with us on this FAT50 journey to just help our ambassadors on their journey in your particular field. So, cannot wait for you to share your story, your collegiate journey, but also to just share what you are doing on your professional journey. So, thank you so much for saying yes in partnering with FAT50.
Yeah, it's an honor to be here. I mean, I think it's amazing what you guys are doing. This is something that I wish I definitely would have had at everyone's age. And, it's really important for me to be spreading this knowledge just because this is something that I wish I really would have learned. And so I'm really honored to be able to be here and be that person for someone that I wish I would have had at that age.
Well, thank
Um,
you. And of course, my coworker and colleague, Gina Urango, she actually, when I asked all of my colleagues, like, is there anyone that I should be reaching out to? Gina, highly recommended you. That she thought that this specific topic was something that she felt like all of our ambassadors would definitely benefit from. And of course, when our very first conversation, me having two daughters of my own, I thought, oh my gosh, this was something that I definitely thought they could definitely benefit from, and as well as all of our other ambassadors. So I cannot wait for one, all of the girls and their parents to join in on the call. It's always funny whenever it's topics like that, what we're going to discuss. I have to be very careful when I'm talking to Coach Rob about it because he starts squirming like a middle school boy.
oh.
So when I first brought it up to him, he's like, I don't want to hear about it. And so I'm at his house now because he's doing a big training, getting all of the girls ready for camp. And he was like, I don't think I know about this call. You didn't tell me about the call. And I was like, I've been trying to protect you about the call. And he was like, why? And so when I told him, he started squirming again. And he was like, I don't want to know about that call. Like, so it's great. But our CEO, Ashley, was like, I think all the dads should be on the call too if they have daughters. So
Mhm.
so I'll
Absolutely.
so I'll make Coach Rob listen to this. I'll just
All
trick
right.
him and
Yeah,
put this.
yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He doesn't know what he's talking what he's listening to.
right, right.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, Gina, it was really awesome when Gina contacted me about it. I actually got the honor to work with her, and her journey coming off of birth control and just getting to talk with her. And she's a close friend of mine, but just how much she dove into this and was just wanting to learn about her body, I feel like speaks volumes to her as an athlete, but as a person as well. And I think you're right. Like, this is a topic that I think some people have started to hear about. I think cycle syncing is kind of one of those phrases that people have like somewhat become accustomed to, but no one really truly understands what that means. And I think a lot of people don't really fully understand what that means in the realm of athletics because it is a little bit different because our lifestyles are a little bit different and ask a little bit more from our bodies than the general public. And so understanding how hormones impact this is a huge part of performance, and just understanding our bodies and females in sport because it is a little bit different than the guys. So really, really excited to get to share this knowledge. That this topic is really coming up and coming, and I'm really, really excited to really just talk about it and educate, but also guide and share some like tangible steps to your life and how to apply it.
well, good. Well, I'm gonna turn it over to you, and I'm so excited for everyone to take notes and of course the replay It's going to be available. They just click the link and they can always use this source, this valuable source from you. And of course, they can, as usual, as always, they can always put any questions in the comment section in our YouTube link, and we will constantly check them throughout our this viewing. So if you have any questions for Kahlee, just we will be checking them. But I'm going to turn it over to you.
Beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, again, it's awesome to be here, and I'm really excited to share this information with you guys. I think kind of what she was saying, it can be a little bit of an uncomfortable topic sometimes, and I really just think it's because we're not used to it. We're not used to the language. We're not we have this idea surrounding it because there's been such a lack of education. And so I'm really excited to just be here and kind of make this conversation a little bit normal because in my day-to-day life, it's game changing being able to talk to fellow athletes, fellow friends about these things and how it impacts our body. Because as athletes, understanding how your body works is probably one of the most important things in your performance. So with that said, Reagan, if you'd put the slides up. Beautiful. So my company is called Flow to Grow. Following college, I studied kinesiology in college. I played at LSU for beach volleyball. And during my journey, I had some health issues. And it really led me down this rabbit hole of just trying to learn and understand my body. And so through this, I had irregular cycles. And I either had no period or I had really heavy periods and really bad PMS. And when I went to professionals, it was kind of just said oh, it's just normal. You're an athlete, periods are irregular. That's just how it's supposed to be. And I, at that time and where I was, I just really didn't believe that. And so I was talking to my mom about it. And I remember she ended up sending me this, podcast about your cycle and what it was. And I think I listened to 5 minutes of it, and I heard the word follicular twice, the word luteal. I heard all these terms that I just had no idea how to pronounce, much less understand. And I remember I was actually walking out of I think I was walking out of ops, which is our workout facility at LSU, and just immediately turning off and being nope, I'm done. I don't understand this. I'm over it. That sort of thing. And I think that's kind of been the history with women's health is there's either a lack of education and awareness of it, or when you do find the awareness of it and the information, it's pretty hard to actually understand and apply. So this is what led me to creating Flow to Grow with my mom. We founded it for women's health and to just really start bringing awareness and tools and education and resources to just help women guide them through this process that really shouldn't be as difficult as it is. And so that's why I created it. And so it's just an athlete's guide to women's health and hormones. Simple as that. So I'm Kahlee. Like I said, I like to say I am Florida raised, Louisiana grown, California living. So I grew up in Florida, and that's where I fell in love with the game. I had the ability to learn about beach volleyball pretty early on, being from Florida, which was great. And then I ended up playing at LSU, and so I grew a lot there. I stayed there a year afterwards to train, and then I went and played professionally, and that's where I am currently out in California. And so just pursuing my professional career here, as well as growing and creating Flow to Grow. So my education, like I said, I went to Louisiana State. I studied kinesiology, and that's what I got my degree in. Following college, I went to the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, where I got my certification in health coaching with a specialty in hormone health. And so during my experiences and over my time through college, my professional career, through my education, what I really began to learn and understand was that the next level is so much more than just being good at your sport. And hormones really do impact us. And so understanding that it's not just about training your sport. Yes, obviously that's a huge part of it. But understanding your nutrition, understanding your recovery, understanding psychology, understanding all these different aspects of athletics is what really leads us to be able to play at that next level and to play at the highest form that we know how. And it's a really important thing to start to understand and to start to learn. So how are we different than the boys? I think this fact is always really funny because people tend to be pretty shocked by it, I guess. But a man's hormone cycle is 24 hours. So every single day they go through the same hormone cycle, and it's mainly about testosterone. Whereas a woman's hormone cycle is actually 28 days. And so we fluctuate with estrogen and progesterone. And so I think it's really interesting because I think we're taught, especially as athletes, to do the same thing day to day. We're treating ourselves as if we're the same person day to day. And like if something works, like we do it. Like morning we do this, afternoon we do this, night we do this. And truthfully, it's not really the case as women because physiologically we're actually different day to day, week to week. And it's important to learn how to pay attention to that. So then we can actually make adjustments, because if we're treating ourselves like we're the same person, then we're not actually showing up as our best selves and supporting ourselves best to be able to perform every single day. But when I talk about hormones and the cycle, a lot of people don't really know exactly what that means. But as your hormones fluctuate, they determine what phase you're in for your cycle. So we actually have 4 phases, and they are all part of hormones. So what exactly are hormones? So in this case, or in general, hormones are actually messengers for our body. So you have systems in your body like your digestive system, your respiratory system, all these things that just make your body work. And your hormones are messengers for that. So they give your body information. And so we have a bunch of different hormones, but the main ones determine our 4 phases of our cycle. So you see the top here, tier 3 is estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. So those are our sex hormones. And those are what actually we're going to be talking, or mainly talking about today. And that's what determine the 4 phases of your cycle. So, this looks a little messy, but this didn't translate very well. But basically, these are the 4 phases of your cycle. And many people just think of your period when you think about your cycle. But in reality, there's these 4 phases, and they're all determined by fluctuations in hormones. So when we start the way I think about it is we start from your period. So from day 1 of bleeding, which can be about 3 to 7 days. So that's your bleed phase. And this is when your hormones are at its lowest point. So the next phase then is your follicular phase, which no one tends to remember the name of that one. I don't know why that one's the hardest. But that's when your hormones are actually on the rise. So I like to call this the rise phase just because I think it makes a little more sense to people than follicular. But this lasts from 7 to 10 days. So between your menstruation and follicular, that creates the first half of your cycle. Then we go into ovulation. And so ovulation is around 48 hours. So this is the shortest one, but this is when testosterone and estrogen actually peak. So we tend to feel our best. I call this the shift phase because this is when all of our hormones peak and we're kind of going into the new phase of transition. And then the last phase is the luteal phase. And this is when we experience the most fluctuations. So I call this the reflect phase because this is when we can tell how things are going throughout our cycle. So if we experience PMS, it's typically during this time. And so it can tell us how well we've been taking care of our bodies this entire time. And a little fun fact about ovulation that a lot of people don't know is this is the only time when we can actually get pregnant. So we can only get pregnant 7 days out of our cycle. So we can't get pregnant the entire time. It's only in those 7 days, and it's surrounding ovulation. Next. So the questions I typically get, the first question is typically, what is cycle syncing? And this is kind of the hot term that a lot of people have heard over social media. And cycle syncing really is making adjustments based on what phase you're in. And so as an athlete, this might be a little bit hard to follow because we're on a little bit of a different time clock, especially in college. And so cycle syncing typically is around things like, in my luteal phase, I'm going to do yoga instead of working super hard. Or not working super hard, that's not what I mean, but instead of doing like a HIIT workout, you're going to do yoga. So they're like little micro adjustments here and there, but as an athlete, especially in college, that's not always how we're able to approach training. And so learning to approach it in a different way is a huge, huge part of just learning to pay attention. So I don't like to use the term cycle syncing because I feel like it's this association with these strict guidelines that we have to do these things during these phases or else we're going to feel like crap. But in reality, what I'm trying to teach you to do is just to learn to pay attention to our bodies and learn to understand a little bit more so that we can actually make those adjustments as those feelings come up, not necessarily as these like hard timelines between phases. And so, well, back to the top. But the second question that I normally get is, well, what about birth control? And I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on birth control. I know it's a pretty controversial topic, but a little bit of education is birth control is synthetic hormones. So each pill gives you the hormones in the fluctuation that they're supposed to be happening. And so that's why if you are given birth control for PMS symptoms or imbalances or stuff, that's why they tend to help, is because it's actually giving you it in a more regulated sense. And you have a withdrawal bleed that isn't actually your period. It's just a withdrawal from the synthetic hormones. And so there's good and bad. I think there's a time and place for birth control, but I think it's really important for people to understand what exactly birth control is doing and not using it as a Band-Aid, but using it as a tool. And so in terms of cycle syncing and understanding your body, I still think there is value in learning to pay attention, even if you are on birth control. But technically, you wouldn't necessarily follow those exact same cycle syncing regulations that maybe someone who is not on birth control would do. So the biggest thing that I want everyone to understand is PMS is not normal. And I think this is something that people are pretty shocked by because of the society we live in. But we have these two main sex hormones. So estrogen and progesterone are what are fluctuating during our cycle during these 28 days. And they are supposed to fluctuate and rise at certain times. So at certain times, estrogen is supposed to be higher than progesterone. At other times, progesterone is supposed to be higher. And that's how our body goes throughout 28 days. And if they are not fluctuating at the correct times, that's when we experience an imbalance and we experience PMS. And so this is not how our bodies are meant to function. Our bodies are actually meant to function PMS free, but our hormones have to be balanced and have to be regulated. So what exactly causes these imbalances between estrogen and progesterone? So the imbalances typically come from what we call stress. Everyone knows stress. But the stress response, so when we get stressed, our body produces another hormone called cortisol. And so when cortisol is produced, we go into survival mode. So if Reagan wants to go to the next slide, maybe bouncing through. Beautiful. All right. So when we're stressed, we produce cortisol. And as you can see, cortisol is on tier 1. And so when this gets produced or overproduced, it dysregulates everything above it. So when we get stressed, our body goes into survival mode. So it comes from like the caveman days, the tiger's chasing us, like we're producing cortisol because we have to survive, right? It's really important that we produce cortisol so that we can survive. But in that survival moment, our body shuts down everything else in our bodies that we don't need to survive in that exact moment. And so one of the things that it shuts down is our reproductive system. And it also shuts down our digestive system. So it's not a problem being in that quick moment. In that quick moment, we need to survive. We need to produce cortisol. We need to survive whatever is attacking us. I don't know. But the problem comes from when we have chronic stress. So if we are never able to get out of survival mode, if we are constantly producing cortisol or too much cortisol, or we're getting too much influx of stress in our lives, then we're never able to escape that survival mode, so that our reproductive system, our digestive system, all these other systems in our body that were shut down to help us survive in that moment aren't able to be turned back on to help our body function. So I always say that stress or cortisol is kind of like the bully, because it gets prioritized in our body above all of other hormones. So being able to pay attention to where stressors are in your life is a huge part of understanding how to regulate your system. Because if we aren't regulating cortisol, if we aren't regulating stress, then our reproductive system is shut down and it's not fluctuating correctly. And thus we experience things like PMS. So understanding where stress is coming from in your life is what I tend to teach when it comes to understanding and paying attention and making adjustments for your cycle. There's so many ways to help your body for imbalances, but I think for beginners and people just learning about this, it's really important to first identify where their most stress is in their lives, because I think that is one of the biggest things that makes imbalances, causes PMS, and irregularities in our cycles. And so many people tend to think of stress as like the typical stress, like something bad happened in class today, or something bad happened at the gym, or someone said this to me, or my boyfriend broke up with me, or those sort of things. But there's a lot of different forms of stress that I'm going to take a look at with you guys. And so where I look at is, I think there is nutritional stress, athletic stress, and traditional stress. So in terms of nutritional stress, there's all these vulnerabilities that we have. And so this can look so many different ways, from malnutrition to fluctuating blood sugar levels to inflammatory foods to caffeine. What I see often the most with younger athletes is replacing breakfast or meals with caffeine. And so when we drink caffeine, it actually ups that cortisol in our bodies, thus producing a stress response. So when we wake up in the morning and we don't eat breakfast, our cortisol is already high in the morning. So our cortisol raises in the morning to help us wake up. And then we don't eat. So our body's a little stressed because it thinks it needs food. So then it's like producing more cortisol because it thinks it needs to survive. Then we drink caffeine, which then adds a stress response to our body and it increases cortisol again. Then a lot of times we go to practice, which increases cortisol again because it's another stress response. And we're just stacking these survival instincts over and over and over and over again. And that's what's creating this chronic stress in our body that's not allowing our bodies to reset and have regular systems. And so understanding that eating enough, eating breakfast in the morning, not skipping meals, learning the timing of food and how carbs work in our diets, and not being scared of foods. Those are all a huge part of supporting a regular cycle. And so a lot of times when you don't have a period, many people will go to, are you eating enough? Are you eating the right things at the right times? That sort of thing. Are you recovering? So those are all huge things. And if you guys are experiencing things like that, I really, really encourage you guys to work with a dietitian or to reach out to someone to learn where nutritional stress could be coming up in your lives, because this is such a huge part of supporting your body and supporting your cycle. The next stress that I look at is athletic stress. And so stress, I want to emphasize, is not necessarily a bad thing. So there is absolutely a time and place for stress. And when we work out, when we practice, like those are what we would call good stress, but we have to be able to transition out of it. So when I go to practice, I have this like stress response. which is great. It's fine. It's completely healthy for my body to experience stress. But the problem arises when I'm not able to switch out of this survival mode. So I go to practice, I get super stressed, cortisol helps me wake up, helps me go run down that ball, whatever. But then immediately I go to class or I go to the next thing and I don't have a second to switch out of the survival mode. And that's when we experience a lot of problems. So incorporating things like cool downs or breathing after practice or stretching or warming up before practice, being able to sleep, like those are all things that we can help our bodies switch out of this survival mode and be able to start recovering and be able to start operating completely and functioning correctly. So those are all extremely huge. Overtraining is a huge part of this. So if we're training too much, we experience this athletic stress at such a high rate that our bodies don't know how to switch out of it again. So really, really important. I know like a lot of us hear about cool downs. I know I heard about cool downs all growing up and it's like, yeah. Okay, cool. Like awesome. Like maybe I'll like touch my toes real quick. But no, like actually taking a second to like sit down and relax and like tell your body that it doesn't need to survive anymore. Like it doesn't need to be like on guard or like on alert, is a huge, huge part of supporting your body and your cycle. So the last stressor I want to talk about is just the traditional stress. And so this is kind of what we generally think about. So day-to-day stressors, you had a fight with your friend, something went wrong, you're stressed about a project, injury is also a stress. So these are all huge things. And this is kind of what we tend to think about with solutions like journaling, meditation, resetting, time in nature, like doing fun things. These are like the traditional things that you're like, oh, you're stressed, like go do these. And I just really want to encourage you guys that there's this kind of taboo around it, I feel like. But there's physiological reasons that this helps your body. And it's really teaching your body how to get out of that survival mode. And honestly, a huge part of this is just doing things that you love. Like, I really want to encourage you guys to do things that you love just outside of the sport, because it allows your body to just take a second to breathe and take a second to rest and not have to feel so go, go, go all the time. So really having hobbies that you love that just help you slow down. It's really, really, really vital to help you switch out of that survival mode and to support your cycle. So understanding how women's health impacts us as athletes is what I really kind of want to go into next. And so women's health, like we just said, it's really finding where are all these stressors in my life, how is it impacting me, how is my body functioning, that sort of thing. So when we start paying attention to women's health, we start noticing how it impacts other areas of ourselves. And like I said before, we are so much more than just our sport. And so learning what type of athlete you are and getting to the next level often involves things like nutrition, things like recovery, things like psychology, and learning to pay attention to how does my cycle actually impact these things. Because our cycle isn't just our period. Remember, it's day to day, it's week to week, it fluctuates, all these things. And it really does impact all these areas of our life. And learning to pay attention to that is how we make those adjustments to then support ourselves. So then we're able to perform at our highest level at all times. So looking at that, you could go to the next slide, Reagan. Beautiful. So we often think of sport. I think I kind of skipped over that, but we often understand that it impacts sport. And so the health of our cycle obviously helps us be our absolute best as athletes. And that thus helps our performance in sport. And what we don't often think about is how does it impact our nutrition? So looking at our nutrition in the next slide, the fluctuations of estrogen and progesterone actually impact your hunger levels, it impacts your metabolism, and it impacts the way we process certain foods. So learning cycle to cycle, and it's a lot to get into. I just kind of wanted to introduce the subject to you guys. But from cycle to cycle, phase to phase, your hunger levels can change. So how much food you want and you need to recover and to support yourself, like we were talking about the nutritional stress. So eating more in certain phases is actually encouraged, or else you'll be in that nutritional stress and you're vulnerable to that nutritional stress. So understanding that is a huge part of nutrition. Then looking at recovery, during different phases, we actually recover different. We sleep different. Our body's ability to produce speed and power is different. Our ligaments are different, how loose our ligaments are, how strong our ligaments are. So our energy levels. So the lower our energy is, the lower our hormones tend to be. So during your period where you're at your lowest hormones, that's typically when we have our lowest energy levels. Then ovulation, when we're at our highest hormone levels, that's when we have the highest energy levels. And so this really does impact our ability to show up, our ability to recover, and we often don't track back to it. So then also looking at psychology. So estrogen and progesterone impact our neurotransmitters. And for those who don't know what neurotransmitters is, those can impact your mood. And so the higher your estrogen levels are, so during the first half of your cycle, your estrogen is on the rise. In the second half, your progesterone is on the rise. So in the first half, as estrogen rises, your focus increases, your energy increases, your motivation increases. All these things, because of estrogen's relationship with certain neurotransmitters, actually just makes you feel so much more focused, so much more motivated. And oftentimes we don't even realize that that's what's happening. We're just like, oh, I feel fantastic today. And then like 4 days later, you're like, oh my God, how did I ever move that weight? Or how did I ever want to go to practice? Like I suck at volleyball. And we just think it's this fluctuation. We just think that, oh, suddenly we suck. In reality, our hormones are fluctuating and impacting our ability to perceive these events, to show up to practice, to feel motivated, to feel energized. And so learning to pay attention is one of the biggest things in our cycle. And if you could go to the next slide. So a lot of this is a lot. Like I just want to take a second and really have you guys understand that it can feel extremely intimidating to learn all of this. And I know I'm throwing all these terms at you like cortisol and estrogen and follicular. And I want you to understand that I know how intimidating this can feel if you've never heard of these things. But if you take one thing away from this talk is I want you guys to learn to pay attention day to day and not just think things are happening because you suck that day or you felt great that day. Like, how do I track back? If I felt great today, what did I do the day before? Where am I at in my cycle? What is impacting me? And learning to track these things is a tool that I think a lot of people don't necessarily use. But when I first started tracking, when I first started understanding my cycle, I started tracking like how I was feeling. I started tracking my energy levels, how I was performing at practice and that sort of thing. And I noticed that I actually started to get like minor tweaks, like not fully injured, but just like little tweaks here and there. And I was like, that's weird. Like it's happening kind of periodically. And I started tracking and I started writing it down. And I realized that it was happening at the same spot in my cycle every single month. So little things like that I would have never thought in years past that had anything to do with my hormone cycle. Like injuries, no. Like why would I track that back to my cycle? But your cycle impacts so many different areas of our lives. Like I said, like it impacts our nutrition, impacts our recovery, impacts our mind. And learning to track helps you understand how that relates to all these things and what is happening in my phases. What do I need to adjust? Can I adjust? That sort of thing. And there's so many apps out there. And if you guys want suggestions, I have great suggestions. I do pay for mine. If you can be as simple as pen and paper, truthfully, if you guys want. I know Period Tracker is really amazing. Moody is probably one of my favorite for new people because it helps kind of educate and walk you guys through everything as well. But I really want to encourage you guys to just find some time day to day. Like I take maybe a minute in the mornings to just go through what did I feel yesterday. And it really goes a really long way. And just learning that this whole process isn't these strict guidelines. And I think social media kind of gives us this idea that it has to be these certain foods. It has to be this exact workout. It has to be all these like strict rules and guidelines. But in reality, it's just learning to understand and learning to pay attention. And what adjustments do I need? Because all of us are so different. And all of us need different things. And understanding how to adjust week to week is what's going to make you perform your best and you feel your best. So I just really want to encourage you guys that go to the last slide, please. We're all so unique as people and as athletes. And I think that's finally starting to get to be talked about. But specifically as women, we are different. And it hasn't been taught very much. And that's what I'm really trying to bring here and really trying to do, because it's me learning it and me talking to other professionals about it. Like, it has blown our minds how impactful it has been in our day-to-day trainings and the way we approach trainings and the way we give ourselves grace and when we push, and just being able to understand our bodies a little bit better has allowed us to feel so much better on the court, so much better training. And I just really want to encourage you guys to really take some time to lean into this and to learn about it, because learning how your body works is learning how you're going to perform your best and learning how you're going to live your best life. So I hope that wasn't too much for you guys, but I really enjoyed being on here and talking to you guys, and please feel free to reach out if you guys have any questions.
No, I think, I mean, actually, Reagan had to hop off, and our marketing director, Haley, and I are great friends, and we were just talking, and she said her and Gina were talking this morning. I mean, this is truly, honestly, Kaylee, this is something that was so like educational. I mean, I'm a mom of two teenage daughters. I mean, I told you when we met earlier, my 18-year-old is about to go to school, and I have a 16-year-old. I mean, this is something like Haley and I were texting while you were talking. It's like, this is you shared stuff that was like, this is something that it was stuff that I never heard before. And Haley said the same thing. And I mean, I even said to Haley, I was like, I mean, I've never shared this with Landon and Lennox. And it's like, how would we know? Of course, I know you went to school. I mean, you are special in this, so, but I hope everyone actually gets something from this, and they're going to click on the link and go back to, I mean, and use this as a source, because it was so educational. And even that slide, I mean, I took a picture of that slide of the male versus female, and even like taking care, I mean, like, it sounds really kind of like just so simple to the fact, like, I mean, I even think about like my husband, like my girls and I will even kind of sometimes talk like how, like, my husband will, like, when he's tired, he literally is like, I'm going to bed. Like, I mean, it doesn't matter like I mean, we can have a house full of people. He knows, like, when I'm tired, he's going to bed. But for me, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to do this, I have to do that. I mean, like, I can't shut down. And what that does to my body, but male versus female, right? Like what we're doing, and then how it impacts the next day. Even with food, when you were talking about food, like, okay, if I don't eat, and if I replace it with caffeine, how that replaces it, and it just keeps adding on, versus how we do things, how different people process that throughout the day. And I was just thinking of the cycle of just how I'm doing that and teaching my girls to do that. So this was just so impactful. It really was. So, and just like generational, how you do that, and you're just passing that on, of teaching others to do that too. So that was so helpful. But I think we do have some questions if you have some time.
Yeah. And I want to say too, like, I think this is a topic that we're expected to learn from our moms. who were expected to learn from their moms, who never learned, who were expected, it's like this like cycle of like,
Yeah.
okay, well, if they never learned, how are they supposed to teach us?
Yeah.
So hopefully changing that by just having these conversations more often.
And I mean, I love like your generation. I mean, you were saying the word sex. I mean, like you, your
Yeah.
generation can say the word and it's fine. But
Mm-hmm.
like in my generation, I feel like okay, you can say it a little bit, but like my mom's generation, like you do not say that word. It's such a dirty word
Yeah.
to say, right?
Yeah.
Because you weren't even saying that word in that sense, but
Mm-hmm.
that's a whole educational thing, and to really talk about it, because this is something like if you're not sharing it and educating it, it's like how can you not, right? Because like you said, it is impacting how you play,
Yeah.
you know, your
Mm-hmm.
nutrition, and it can be so much like the injuries too, like oh that could have impacted my injury, I
Yeah.
didn't think about that.
Mm-hmm.
So and it's something when our student athletes when they go to school, I love especially the level of play, right? When you go to
Mm-hmm.
school, I mean, it's something that they're going to have great relationships with, the nutritionist, with the team
Yeah.
doctor, that they are going to have these
Mm-hmm.
relationships, that they are going to be able to talk to them about it. And it's not something embarrassing like, okay, I shouldn't, why,
Yeah.
why are you not talking about these topics? So I think it's great.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's such a disservice for female athletes to not talk about because we're
Right,
uncomfortable. And I think like how how crazy is it that because we're uncomfortable about it, we're not allowing female athletes to reach their full potential because they don't fully understand their bodies and how
right,
it impacts them.
right,
And I think that's where I get really passionate about this topic is because it does impact us and it
right,
impacts our body's ability to function and thus perform. And so that's the nature we should be talking about it in front.
right,
Like it shouldn't be this like weird, uncomfortable thing. Like it's literally how does my body work?
right. But I think this younger generation, especially the teens now and in college, I don't I think there's very little that they're uncomfortable about or
Yeah,
embarrassed about,
that's
which is
true.
which is a great
Yeah,
thing. I
yeah,
think um,
absolutely.
I think we, especially my generation, I mean, you're younger than me, was taught to be so like modest and ashamed or whatever. And I think they're
Mhm.
so open and free, like, let's talk. And
Yeah,
are you ashamed? Like, it's so, the things
yeah,
that you shouldn't be ashamed about, I think they're so open to talk about, which is great. And I
yeah,
think you talking about topics like this is going to really educate and help them. That's my prayer, my goal
I
anyway,
agree.
that you were talking about topics like this. So just imagine when they're when they
Yeah,
graduate, imagine their
yeah,
platform or what they're going to
mhm,
talk about, right? So
yeah,
I just think it's awesome. So no, I think it's great, and I'm cheering for you for all
thank you.
all that you're doing, because I think it's just going to open up so many doors for them to open up their of how they're going to educate the next generation as well. So
Yeah,
bravo to you.
absolutely. Thank you.
Okay,
Excited
so
to see what athletes come out of it,
I
what
know,
we
and
can do.
I love the connection that you and Reagan were making right at the beginning too. So I
Mhm.
know she had to jump off, but
Yeah,
hopefully that'll be a even better connection to come forth.
yeah,
So, but I think we
definitely.
have a few questions if you have a little time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, okay, let's see.
Ooh, Chun. Okay. Hmm. Let me think. I'll kind of go through each one, like how I would think about it.
Okay,
Um, so to eat while training, I guess, and just in general. But so my menstrual phase, I definitely prioritize like blood sugar balance, and warm foods. So I really, really like good cooked meals during my menstrual phase. My follicular phase is like when carbs are like yes. So I really try to make sure I eat enough carbs during my follicular phase. I don't know if you want like exact meals of what I would do. I probably would maybe go towards like maybe like a sandwich during my follicular phase. I feel like that's what I would like. Sorry if you're gluten-free, maybe gluten-free sandwich.
Free bread.
Yeah, exactly. Ovulation, it's probably pretty similar for me to follicular, like a little bit more carbs, maybe some like B vitamins, so like salmon or something like that. And then during my luteal phase, I almost always choose sweet potatoes. And my menstrual phase also, I typically do beef. So I don't eat a whole bunch of red meat, but it's a really good iron replacement during your menstrual phase. So that's typically when I tend to eat it a little bit more. But during my luteal phase, I'd probably do like sweet potatoes, ground turkey, and like some sort of veggie or something like that.
Okay.
Oh, buddy. So sorry. So sorry. Gosh, that's so hard. Because a lot of times we are at their mercy. Gosh, I hate that so much. I would say one, understanding. In terms of responding, I don't know if there's that much that we can really do besides maybe potentially having a conversation with the coaches, and making them talk about it, because a lot of them are probably really uncomfortable about it and don't really understand it. So being able to have that conversation, I don't know if they are like that, if they're going to be that open to receiving it. I think in terms of having severe cramps, I think maybe just looking at why severe cramps may be impacting you, because kind of what I was saying, PMS really isn't normal. And so if it's impacting our performance that much, there's probably something to look into there. But I am sorry that's happening. I know that's so difficult to deal with. That's a good question. I go back and forth, to be completely honest. I personally do not encourage it, just because it does induce a stress response. So if you are someone who struggles with cortisol and struggles with PMS, not eating for an extended period of time, so like say you're not eating till like 11 o'clock in your training, I don't think that's the best for us, especially if we're training, to not be eating before training. That just creates a really big stress response in our bodies. However, I do think everyone's body is very different. And if it's something that works for you and you feel good with it and you haven't felt any like symptoms from it, then I wouldn't push you to go away from it. But I personally do not think it is the best for hormones and women's health. But like I said, if it feels good for you and you haven't experienced any issues with it, then I wouldn't encourage you to go away from it. If your period doesn't feel normal, okay. The first step I would take is to start tracking. So to get an app and to track when you feel your symptoms. From there, you can kind of start seeing patterns. And start to understand maybe where you need to support your body. So once you start tracking, kind of what I was talking about with the stress, is try to identify where do you think the most stress is showing up in your life. So I would look at nutrition. Am I eating enough? Am I eating at the right times? So making sure that you're eating before training, that you're eating protein and carbs after training, that you're eating enough through the day, that you're hydrating. That's probably where I would personally start. In terms of recovery, I would try cool downs or looking at your sleep. And then mental stress, if you want to try those like journals or meditations, but just start with one thing. Like you don't need to do all these a million things. Just figure out where the one thing that you think you're experiencing the most stress in your life is, and just start trying to implement from there. Favorite way to self-care. That's a good one. For me, I always think of self-care as like a reset button. And so I think of like what's going to make me feel the most me. And so often for me, that's time in nature. So if I really like need to feel more like myself, I'll go sit on the beach at sunset, or I'll go to a park, or if I can, like I'll go hiking or camping or something like that. But that's probably the like activity that makes me feel the most myself. If I'm short on time, I like to like draw or journal or something like that.
Awesome. Thank you. That was great.
Beautiful.
You were, I think that was perfect. And I think it was great too, especially for everyone going into championship summer, because
Mm-hmm.
we actually are kicking off the first championship in a couple of weeks with our P1440
Nice.
Nationals. So I think that was, I mean, even the nutrition part to kind of take everyone knowing sleep and nutrition and taking care of their body. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you. I know we will share the link because that's one thing that everyone will be, if they missed the call or couldn't write fast enough, that everyone will want to know, like,
Yeah.
how can we replay it. So thank you, Kahlee, so much. And thank you for partnering with us. And good luck to you in your training and your competition season as well this summer.
Thank you so much. It was really great being here.
Okay. Thank you. Good
All right.
night.
I'll see you guys.
Okay. Yay.